In New York City, one single fire forever changed how buildings are designed, how workplaces are protected, and how firefighters operate to this day. This video reveals the true story behind the Triangle Shirtwaist factory fire, an event that exposed hidden dangers inside everyday buildings and forced the city to rethink fire safety from the ground up. You'll discover how a small electrical failure became a historic warning, why firefighters faced challenges no one expected, and how this moment reshaped emergency exits, inspections, and fire prevention laws across the United States. Stay until the end, because what was learned from this fire still protects New York today. And the lessons may surprise you more than you imagine. New York in the early 1900s was a city moving faster than its own safety systems could handle. Buildings were rising quickly. Factories were packed into upper floors, and production mattered more than protection. Manhattan, especially areas like Greenwich Village, was filled with industrial spaces that operated day and night. Fire risk was everywhere, yet was rarely discussed as a priority. This environment created the perfect conditions for historic fires that would later force change. At that time, factories were designed to maximize space, not safety. Narrow hallways, limited stairwells, and poorly planned exits were common. Fire safety standards were minimal, and inspections were rare or inconsistent. Many building owners believed fires were unlikely, or that firefighters would always arrive in time. This false sense of security placed enormous pressure on New York firefighters long before an emergency even began. Firefighters in New York in 1911 worked under extreme limitations. Their equipment was basic compared to modern standards, with ladders that could not reach the upper floors of many buildings. Protective gear was heavy and inefficient, and communication systems were slow. Despite this, firefighters were expected to control fires in increasingly taller and more complex structures. Every response was a test of endurance, skill, and improvisation. Industrial growth also meant overcrowded workspaces. Factories often stored flammable materials close together, increasing fire hazards. Electrical systems were frequently overloaded, poorly maintained, or outdated. Sparks, heat, and mechanical friction were part of daily operations, yet fire prevention was rarely enforced. In this environment, even a small malfunction could escalate rapidly. Public awareness of fire danger was limited. Many workers and building managers viewed fires as rare accidents rather than predictable risks. Fire drills were almost non-existent, and emergency planning was not required by law. This lack of preparation meant that when fires occurred, confusion spread faster than flames. Firefighters often arrived to scenes already out of control. The city itself struggled to keep up with regulation. Laws had not evolved alongside architecture, and safety codes lagged behind innovation. Skyscrapers and multi-floor factories introduced new challenges, but fire regulations still reflected older, smaller buildings. This gap between progress and protection made fires more dangerous with each passing year. Fire prevention as a concept was still developing. Sprinkler systems were uncommon. Fire alarms were limited, and emergency exits were not standardized. Many buildings relied on assumptions instead of systems. Firefighters understood these risks, but without legal support, their ability to prevent disasters was limited. New York firefighters became witnesses to repeated warning signs. Small fires, near misses, and structural issues were frequent, yet rarely resulted in meaningful reform. Each incident highlighted vulnerabilities, but change moved slowly. The city continued to grow upward, while safety remained grounded in outdated thinking. This period shaped the mindset of firefighters, who learned to expect the unexpected. They adapted through experience rather than regulation. Every call carried unknown risks, especially in industrial buildings. Firefighters were often the final barrier between a manageable incident and a historic disaster. By 1911, New York was a city full of ambition, innovation, and overlooked danger. The conditions were set for a fire that would expose everything that had been ignored. The Triangle Shirtwaist Factory existed within this reality, and what happened next would force the city firefighters and lawmakers to confront fire safety in a way they never had before. The Triangle Shirtwaist Factory operated inside a building that reflected the priorities of its time rather than the risks it carried. Located in Manhattan's Greenwich Village, the factory occupied the upper floors of a multi-story structure designed for production efficiency, not emergency response. The height of the building alone already created challenges for fire safety, especially considering the firefighting equipment available in New York during that era. Inside the factory, space was tightly organized to support large-scale garment production. Rows of workstations, materials, and equipment filled the floors with little room for movement. This dense layout increased fire hazards by limiting airflow and creating conditions where heat and smoke could spread quickly. Fire prevention was not part of the daily routine, and safety planning was almost non-existent. One of the most critical vulnerabilities was the limited access to exits. Stairwells were narrow, and emergency routes were not clearly planned for fast evacuation. Some doors were restricted to control movement within the factory, a common practice at the time. These decisions made for operational control ignored the importance of quick and safe exit during emergencies. The building's emergency infrastructure was inadequate. Fire escapes were poorly designed and not built to handle large numbers of people moving at once. There were no modern sprinkler systems installed, and fire alarms were either absent or insufficient. Fire safety relied heavily on the assumption that incidents could be managed before becoming serious. Electrical systems inside the factory reflected the standards of the early 1900s. Wiring was often exposed, overloaded, or poorly maintained. Machines ran continuously, producing heat and vibration that increased the likelihood of electrical failure. In such an environment, a single malfunction could introduce immediate danger without warning. Fire inspections were rare and lacked enforcement power. Even when concerns were raised, there were few legal consequences for ignoring them. Building owners and factory operators focused on productivity, trusting that serious fires were unlikely. This mindset allowed risks to accumulate unnoticed. Workers inside the factory were not trained for emergencies. Fire drills were not required, and clear instructions for evacuation were not provided. Without preparation, even a minor incident could quickly escalate into confusion. Firefighters arriving at such a scene would face not only fire but disorganization. The Triangle Shirtwaist factory was not unique in its design. Many factories across New York followed similar layouts and safety practices. This made the building a symbol of a broader issue affecting industrial workplaces throughout the city. Firefighters had seen these conditions before, but change had not yet followed. From the outside, the building appeared stable and modern for its time. Inside, however, contained hidden dangers that only became visible during emergencies. Firefighters understood these risks, but lacked authority to enforce preventive measures. The factory represented the intersection of rapid industrial growth and neglected safety. It stood as an example of how buildings could meet economic demands while failing basic fire prevention principles. These conditions set the stage for a fire that would soon force New York to confront its approach to workplace and fire safety. The fire at the Triangle Shirtwaist factory began in a way that seemed small and ordinary, yet it quickly revealed how fragile safety systems were at the time. Inside a busy industrial environment, a likely electrical failure introduced heat where it was never expected. In factories like this, machines operated continuously, and wiring carried heavy loads throughout the day, creating conditions where a single spark could become dangerous. Once the fire started, it found immediate fuel. Fabrics, paper patterns, and wooden furniture were common throughout the workspace. These materials allowed flames to spread rapidly across confined areas. Without modern fire-resistant construction, the building offered little resistance. Heat and smoke moved faster than anyone inside anticipated. The layout of the factory made the situation worse. Narrow spaces and crowded work areas limited movement and visibility. As smoke expanded, confusion grew. Emergency routes were not clearly defined, and the absence of alarms delayed awareness of the severity of the situation. What could have been a controlled incident quickly escalated beyond initial expectations. Firefighters in New York received the alarm and responded with urgency. Calls reporting fire in an upper-floor factory immediately raised concerns. Fires at higher elevations were already known to be difficult, and every minute mattered. Firefighters understood that access, water supply, and ladder reach would be critical factors. As the fire intensified, heat built rapidly inside the structure. Smoke filled corridors and stairwells, making navigation difficult. Fire behavior in enclosed industrial spaces was not yet fully understood, adding to the challenge. Firefighters arriving on scene faced a rapidly evolving situation with limited information. Communication during the early moments was chaotic. Without advanced signaling systems, information traveled slowly between floors and to emergency responders. Firefighters had to rely on visual cues and experience to assess the severity of the fire. Decision-making occurred under intense pressure. The building's height limited how quickly firefighters could intervene from the outside. Ladders reached only certain levels, forcing crews to adapt. Interior access became essential, increasing risk and complexity. Firefighters were pushed to the limits of their training and equipment. Water delivery also posed challenges. Hose lines needed to be extended upward, reducing pressure and effectiveness. Coordinating crews in tight stairwells tested teamwork and endurance. Firefighters worked with determination, knowing that conditions were worsening by the minute. Despite their efforts, the fire demonstrated how quickly an industrial blaze could overwhelm early 20th century firefighting methods. Every action required improvisation. Firefighters relied on instinct, courage, and coordination rather than technology. This moment exposed a critical truth for New York. Fires in tall industrial buildings required new strategies, better equipment, and stronger prevention measures. The Triangle Shirtwaist factory fire revealed gaps that could no longer be ignored, marking a turning point in how the city understood fire risk and emergency response. When New York firefighters arrived at the Triangle Shirtwaist factory, they were immediately confronted with conditions that tested every part of their training. The building's height and dense construction limited access points, forcing crews to make rapid decisions. Firefighters understood that controlling the fire would require both interior and exterior efforts, even with the risks involved. Ladders were among the first challenges. At the time, most fire department ladders were not designed to reach the upper floors of tall industrial buildings. This forced firefighters to rely heavily on stairwells and internal access routes. Moving equipment upward through narrow passages demanded strength, coordination, and speed. Water supply became another critical factor. Extending hose lines to higher levels reduced water pressure, making suppression more difficult. Firefighters had to carefully manage flow while navigating smoke-filled spaces. Every adjustment mattered, as fire conditions changed rapidly inside the structure. Communication between crews was limited by the technology of the era. Without modern radios, firefighters depended on shouted instructions and visual signals. This made coordination harder, especially across multiple floors. Despite this, teamwork remained essential, and crews adapted through experience and trust in one another. Heat and smoke created exhausting conditions. Firefighters wore heavy protective gear that restricted movement and visibility. Breathing was difficult, and physical endurance was constantly tested. Each step forward required determination, as firefighters worked in an environment that offered little margin for error. Interior firefighting required careful judgment. Firefighters had to assess structural stability while advancing toward the fire. The building's materials absorbed heat quickly, increasing the risk of structural failure. These dangers forced firefighters to balance aggression with caution at every moment. Outside the building, additional crews worked to contain the spread of fire. Preventing flames from extending to neighboring structures was a priority in densely packed Manhattan streets. Firefighters positioned themselves strategically to protect surrounding buildings and limit damage. This fire exposed the limits of existing firefighting strategies. Traditional methods struggled against the scale and intensity of an industrial fire at height. Firefighters recognized that new tools, higher ladders, and better access systems were urgently needed for a growing city like New York. Despite the obstacles, firefighters demonstrated resilience and professionalism. Their response highlighted the dedication required to face unpredictable emergencies. Each action taken during the fire contributed to a deeper understanding of what future firefighting would demand. The experience of battling this fire left a lasting impression on the New York Fire Department. Lessons learned during these critical moments would later influence training, equipment design, and operational planning. Firefighters emerged from this event with a clearer understanding that fire safety had to evolve alongside the city itself. The Triangle Shirtwaist factory fire quickly became more than just a local emergency in New York. It revealed deep flaws in how buildings were designed, inspected, and regulated across the country. The scale of the incident forced city leaders, safety experts, and firefighters to confront a reality that could no longer be ignored. Fire safety was no longer optional. It was essential. Public attention turned toward workplace conditions and fire prevention. The fire exposed how limited exits, poor planning, and outdated systems increased risk. As awareness grew, pressure mounted for reform. This moment marked the beginning of serious conversations about safety in industrial buildings, especially in large cities like New York. Firefighters played a key role in shaping the response that followed. Their first-hand experience highlighted the need for better equipment, improved access to upper floors, and stronger fire prevention strategies. Their observations became a foundation for change, influencing how fire departments prepared for similar emergencies. One of the most important outcomes was the transformation of fire safety laws. Regulations began to require clearer emergency exits, improved stairwells, and safer building layouts. Inspections became more structured, and enforcement gained real authority. These changes aimed to prevent future disasters, rather than simply respond to them. Sprinkler systems became a major focus of reform. What was once rare started to be recognized as a critical defense against fire spread. Automatic fire suppression shifted the balance from reaction to prevention, offering protection even before firefighters arrived on scene. Workplace inspections expanded beyond basic compliance. Fire safety became an ongoing responsibility rather than a one-time requirement. Regular evaluations helped identify hazards early, reducing the likelihood of dangerous conditions developing unnoticed. The impact of this fire extended far beyond New York. Cities across the United States studied the lessons learned and adapted their own safety codes. The Triangle Shirtwaist factory fire became a reference point for national fire prevention standards and building regulations. Training for firefighters also evolved. Departments recognized the need to prepare for fires in tall industrial buildings. Equipment improved, ladders extended higher, and strategies adapted to modern architecture. Firefighters became better equipped to handle the challenges of a growing urban landscape. This event helped redefine the role of fire departments. Firefighters were no longer seen only as responders, but also as advocates for prevention. Their insights contributed to safer communities and stronger regulations that protected people and property. The Triangle Shirtwaist factory fire stands as a powerful reminder that fire safety progress often follows hard lessons. The changes it inspired continue to shape how buildings are constructed, how workplaces operate, and how firefighters protect cities today. The story of the Triangle Shirtwaist factory fire reminds us that fire safety is built on lessons learned and improvements made over time. What began as a single incident in New York reshaped how buildings are designed, how workplaces are inspected, and how firefighters prepare for emergencies. The impact of this fire is still present today in emergency exits, sprinkler systems, and fire prevention laws that protect cities across the United States. Firefighters continue to train using the knowledge gained from past events like this one. Every regulation, inspection, and safety upgrade reflects the importance of being prepared before an emergency happens. Understanding fire history helps us appreciate how far fire safety has advanced and why these standards should never be taken for granted. Now, we want to hear from you. Which fire safety rule do you think is the most important in modern buildings today? Have you ever noticed a safety feature that made you feel more protected? Leave your answer in the comments and join the conversation with other viewers who care about fire prevention and firefighter history. If you value content like this and want to learn more about historic fires, firefighters, and fire safety lessons, make sure to subscribe to the channel. Don't forget to like this video to support our work and help more people discover these important stories. Your engagement helps keep this channel growing and brings fire safety awareness to even more viewers.